if they're in charge of like that kind of stuff, and their symbolism is demonic in nature, and if you want to get into space stuff when it comes to the Bible, which is where a lot of demonic stuff is, then you got stuff like the firmament. So the fact that you have an agency that is directly involved in like pretty much that where the firmament would be, if you want to talk about that, and they have symbolism that is demonic, like, come on. I don't know, like, I'm not saying anything, but
we just gotta strap Brandon up to like a EKG machine and then just show him the occultic imagery on these government agencies, and he's just like, come on, man. His heart rate's just spiking. It's like, have you been drinking Red Bull? No. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Fictitious Dark, where we explore the line between the truth and the fictitious. I'm Josiah, and I'm here with...
Katie.
Rick.
And Brandon.
And today...
Yay!
Yay! Guest is on. We got Katie.
Yeah, let's go.
Thank you.
Hey, this is the first time that I've been on one with Katie, so let's go.
That's right.
It's the most auspicious event.
I just thought about this. So, the two episodes that we're going to be doing with Katie are going to be probably the two most controversial topics that we're going to be doing with conspiracy theorists and fans of, or no, I shouldn't say fans, but followers of the theories. So
fans of presidential murder.
Yeah,
murder in general. If you're looking at both of them.
Hell yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just a big fan of murder around here.
Of it, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. With the Jack the Ripper podcast, like there was definitely those comments that were like, there was just like so many generalities in the opening. I just couldn't do it. And I'm like, look, I'm sorry you've watched 500 videos on Jack the Ripper, and we just aren't like the scholars, the ripperologists that you need in your life. But go back to Spotify. That's not us. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
we're just three basic people with one cool person. I'll let you all figure out who that cool person is.
Hey, who you calling?
Figure out what's going on, and try to learn, on the fly, what the topic is about. We don't try to like pretend that we're like scholars in any way.
I'm a scholar.
No. I'm a scholar.
I am a scholar.
I am a scholar.
Yeah,
Mr. Dark.
So we are. Did we even say we're talking about the?
No, we haven't even gotten there yet.
It's already fallen off the tracks.
This is why having Katie and Bray on the same podcast is a terrible idea, because
it's a great idea. Hey, it's in the title. He's gonna be in the thumbnail. I'm sure I'll find some outrageous thing to put in the thumbnail that'll make people comment solely based on the thumbnail and think that's the entire video.
Yeah. You know what you should do? You should put the thumbnail of him and then put in text, "He shot himself?" ?
Question mark?
No,
people are gonna be like,
we gotta definitely do JFK, Skinwalker.
Yes,
bro.
Skinwalker.
Maybe. So
this is gonna be our path. This is our path to popularity. Is just always just trolling people who get mad about Skinwalker.
Skinwalker?
Yeah.
I think the vehicle he was in might have been a Skinwalker.
Yeah.
I think the Secret Service were Skinwalkers.
That makes sense.
Might be why they didn't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or it could be the second shooter from the grassy knoll. They were a Skinwalker.
Yeah.
Maybe they blended in with the crowd.
Better yet, the entire grassy knoll is a Skinwalker.
Yeah. They're wearing a grassy pelt.
Yes.
I believe it, honestly.
So, today we are doing another historical episode. This time, our first kind of, as far as I remember, our first kind of political thriller, kind of assassination, true crime beyond like that isn't serial killing. Obviously, with Jack the Ripper, we're doing the assassination of President John F. Kennedy that took place on November 22nd. 1963 at the Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas. first off,
I thought we were talking about Lincoln.
well,
we are gonna a little bit.
If you did the research, there are people who believe that there are like weird foreshadowings for Kennedy in the Lincoln assassination events.
There are actual coincidences. I have the list. I don't know if you want me to pull up the list right now.
Yeah, pull up the list because, I know there's been some people who have suggested that perhaps this is an elaborate death ritual. And so you're replicating. Yes. Oh, yeah, thank you. Texas sweatshirt. Perfect.
Hell yeah.
Right now, Brandon is pulling up a list of all the coincidences between the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
Because there are a few. So
yeah, there's also a good amount of them that were straight up like just facades. So hopefully I'll remember which one is fake as I'm reading it. Okay, both men were elected to Congress in the year 46. Lincoln in 1846, Kennedy in 1946. Both men were elected to the presidency in 60. 1860 for Lincoln, 1960 for Kennedy. Both men were concerned with civil rights. It's kind of obvious. I feel like that one's like not a big deal though. Both men married in their 30s to women in their 20s. Also, that's a wide margin.
Also not a big deal. That's a common thing.
Okay, this one's interesting. Both men lost a son while living in the White House.
Okay. There you go.
I don't remember which one. One of them it was a baby, and then the other one it was like a 7-year-old or something like that. A little bit more up there, which I feel like kind of pushes the death cult sacrifice stuff. But
we'll get into it.
Yeah, we'll get into it. Let's see. Both presidents had 4 children, and both lost 2 before they reached their teens. The doctors for Lincoln and Kennedy had the same name, Charles Taft. Sounds pretty weird. Let's see. That one is a lie.
William Howard Taft, Skinwalker.
Skinwalker? Yeah. Let's see. Both men were shot on a Friday. Both men were shot in the head, but I mean, if you're gonna kill him, you probably want to try to shoot him in the head. Let's see. Both men were shot sitting next to their wives. And that's just kind of sad, honestly. Okay, yeah. Lincoln was sitting in box number 7 of Ford's Theater when he was killed. Kennedy was riding in car number 7 in the cavalcade in a Lincoln car made by the Ford Motor Company.
Yeah.
I had heard that before.
That's the big one.
Both were assassinated by Southerners. That one is
allegedly.
Yeah. That one's not necessarily. Whatever. The law enforcement officer who detained John Wilkes Booth was called Lafayette Baker, as was the man who detained Lee Harvey Oswald as Marion L. Baker. Okay. So Bakers. I can't believe that a chef caught both.
Thank you, chef.
Thank you, chef.
Hands drops the rifle.
It's just the bear. He tackles John Wilkes Booth, and then thank you, chef.
Thank you, chef.
As they're shooting John Wilkes Booth, thank you, chef. Okay. Let's see. Inside joke of people who watch The Bear. If anyone's watched that, it's a good show. Watch it. Both their presidential successors were named Johnson, Andrew Johnson and Lyndon B. Johnson. Interesting. But also a common name. Both men were succeeded by Southerners. more Southern people. Both successors were born in '08. Andrew Johnson in 1808 and Lyndon Johnson in 1908. Both assassins are known by 3 names: John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald. I mean, it's whatever.
Most people have 3 names. We just don't usually say them.
But the thing with the 3
Only
names
variable.
is both assassins' names have 15 letters. So
Yeah.
that's
I
interesting.
am Lord Voldemort.
Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater.
Okay, that's a cool one.
Yeah. Both assassins were themselves assassinated before their trials. I'm
Convenience.
so surprised. Though wasn't like Booth more of a just a shootout?
No. Yeah, it was a shootout. Like
Yeah.
he had weaponry, so he
Yeah.
was not going down easy.
John Wilkes Booth and Lee Harvey Oswald were both originally thought to be lone gunmen, but it was later discovered that they were part of a conspiracy.
Ooh.
I never heard about the Lincoln one. I mean, duh, but
So did you know John Wilkes Booth was he was a Mason. And it was theorized there was actually, I think they have some evidence of conspiracy, or at least there was a group that he was a part of that was seditious. So there's theories about Wilkes Booth working for the Illuminati and stuff like that.
Okay. There's all sorts of stuff when it comes to Masons, because that's another rabbit hole when you get down to Masons being involved in the assassination of Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church. So,
Wait, what?
yeah, you didn't know he was murdered?
No, I knew he was murdered, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was Masons.
It's not 100%, but it's a whole thing of
So is there like a shadow war between the Masons and the Mormons that I just missed out on?
Masonry has a lot of similarities to Mormonism. It's like there's a little bit of like mimicking each other and stuff like that when it comes down to it. So, yeah.
On my recent journey, I've kind of realized that a lot of occult stuff, they all share, borrow, are influenced by each other, but they don't necessarily. They might feel somewhat positively or might not, but they do all kind of share these similar ideas, similar rituals, similar cultural origin points.
I mean, yeah, when it comes down to that type of stuff, that's where you got the what was the thing Tolkien said, that evil cannot create, it can only corrupt. So it is only mimicking, things. It's not coming up with its own original ideas per se. So if you get into actual cultish things, then yeah, makes sense to me.
I'm sure at some point we'll do the big old Mason video or Illuminati video, and that'll be the 3-hour one for sure.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, that is the list of the similarities. Now, where obviously a lot of those sound like just straight up coincidences and whatnot. But the thing that is interesting is when you get into, once again, occult practices and the darker things in life, they are obsessed with patterns.
Every 100 years, something has to happen.
So now when it comes to patterns, that's when you get into rituals. So, it's the idea of waiting for the stars to align. There's all sorts of occult practices when it comes to astrology as well. So why can't you take that type of logic of waiting for the stars to align and put it up to waiting for the president's facts to align? I don't know. Just personality
waiting for the
traits.
bakers, waiting for the bakers and the Tafts.
Yeah, no, it's like you have to wait for all your little components for it to work right. There's probably a way better example, but the thing that popped in my head of the right ingredients is M. Night Shyamalan's Lady in the Water. Just as far as you need all these key ingredients to then perform the ritual, the act of whatever, to summon something or to accomplish something that is greater than yourself and stuff like that. So you need the ingredients, you need the pattern, and you need to bake your little ritual pie accordingly in order to get the correct result. So not saying that we have actual evidence of anything like that being involved with Kennedy, but it is just interesting when you look at patterns and you look at the reason that a lot of certain individuals in life really pay attention to patterns. So if anyone knows anything more, like as far as patterns and stuff goes with that, if you got a thing or two, by all means, we're all ears. Katie looks like she knows a pattern.
Well, I was just thinking as I was listening to you, to play devil's advocate, is it that people are searching for patterns, or that patterns search for people? And what I mean by that is, like, is it an organization who's plotting rituals? Or, I mean, on the flip side, if we're going into different occultist beliefs and stuff like reincarnation, or repetitive patterns where like something needs to be like fulfilled, if you will, and like, or not fulfilled, so it's like
no, yeah,
just
that makes
weird
sense
thought
for me.
popped into my head.
Yeah, I mean, when you get into all of that stuff, life is full of patterns. We need key ingredients for life itself to exist, and somehow we have those ingredients. And that's where then there's the rabbit hole of dark science, where the science is involved with the occult rituals and everything. And people then can get into that with when it comes to the great, stuff that's going on in the world, that's like people talk about like globalism and the elite and stuff like that. A common thing that I think people just don't say out loud, but what they do believe is the great orchestrator of the secret, elite that's like working together. I mean, everyone talks about like, oh, but like people talk, they can't keep a secret. So the idea of these secret governments and everything is stupid, because we would at least know something. And it's like, but if the great orchestrator is the devil, you then don't have to worry about people talking, because they're not necessarily talking to each other, because the person communicating in between all of them is something you can't see. I
mean, something I would say, I've always found that logic kind of silly, because the logic of, well, people would talk, that clearly doesn't matter, because our society is almost designed to shout down conspiracy theories. Like anytime someone even comes close to those kind of thoughts, within reason, like with JFK, pretty much most people, with MLK, most people will, concede, yes, it was most likely a conspiracy. But usually I find that this kind of thinking is said, well, it's not verified, it's not a fact, it's hearsay. The whole game is set up to discourage validating that even kind of thinking, or even if someone came forward, are they even going to be believed in the massive information that gets shoved out onto the internet constantly? So I don't really buy that logic of, well, someone would talk. It's like, well, maybe they did. You just haven't seen it because you're inured with TikTok and you're not looking in the actual places where information could be found,
Well, and an interesting thought on that is look at how algorithms work, because like the more globalized we get and the more we can communicate across the internet, something that, again, this is a separate conspiracy theory, so I won't dive too deep into it. But when all of like the Epstein lists came out, and we knew a lot of people were on it, including like Will and Jada Smith, and then shortly after it at an awards show, Jada gets called out for her alopecia. Will Smith goes up and slaps somebody in the face and says, keep my name out your mouth. And there's this whole explosion. And it's like now everybody's focused so much more on the drama about what Will and Jada did at this award show than they are about the fact that their names were in this book.
I mean, yeah,
you know?
no, I definitely, rather than watching a deep dive on the Epstein flight log, I did more so want to rewatch G.I. Jane. So,
Yeah, it's there are certain things to take us off the narrative into a more controllable one. And speaking of controllable narratives, the big thing about the JFK assassination that is just completely ridiculous to me is that we had this initial Warren Commission, and just because it was the first, it's listed as a fact, even though there's been House subcommittees on assassinations, there's been plenty more evidence and examination. It was a conspiracy. But because this one was the first one, and all the intelligence agencies say, yep, that's the facts.
Put it in the books.
Put it in the books. That's what it is.
Case closed.
It doesn't matter that it was faulty interviewing, like really bad logic and evidence for a lot of stuff. I mean, the magic bullet theory, we can get into that, but because it was first,
you could do a spin-off show where it's Mythbusters, but you're just like
breaking down down assassinations. I mean, if you watch a JFK documentary, which we are right now, actually, we just got off watching a very obscure one, one that is pretty insane, but I encourage both of you to watch it if you can. It's called Dark Legacy, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but the premise of Dark Legacy is that, and I've seen it before, is that the CIA killed Kennedy, and who was working in the CIA around this time, who can't remember where he was on the day that these happened, a certain other president, Mr. George Herbert Walker Bush.
But that's 4 names, not 3.
Yeah.
That's why he didn't actually pull the trigger. When you're running the show, you get an extra name, and then you tell the guy with 3 names what to do.
There you go. It's a hierarchy of names.
You know what they say, stuff goes downhill. So next I had to have 3 names.
So that's what that one is about. It's low budget, but I would say it's pretty compelling in its narrative that it's spinning. Especially with regard to like the stuff about the bullet hitting him in the back of the head when he clearly gets thrown backwards, and it's like, that's not.
I came across something a while ago, but like it does seem like it's just AI and it's not real. But the whole going back is like the whole thing that it's about. So this conspiracy is that the footage itself that you see is doctored. That the famous JFK footage is not the real footage, that is the edited footage, and there's like evidence in it. Like there's like, if you look now, it's an old camera, so I feel like, whatever. There's trees in the background where it looks like it's like cut or whatever, so it's not on the ground, it's like floating right above the ground, and you can see like just a little bit in between. Like there's little things that it's like if somebody edited it, these were little things they missed or whatever. But so what happens in this footage that they claim to be the original unedited footage is there is a shot, there's like the 2 shots or whatever. But the shot number 3 is the driver turning back and then shooting him in the head. And they're like, and this makes sense because also the wife's reaction to then go back to almost like it's a little bit of a jolt, like get away from that guy reaction, but then also go for the pieces of Kennedy's head. So I don't know. That one was just like this, like it really looks like it could be like a fake AI video, but I don't know. It's kind of interesting. So
if anything, if you don't take it as literal, it's a good symbolic representation of how people feel the assassination went down, even if it's not the literal events, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like literally. The thing that's just wild is to think, with how far AI's come and how there are videos that can kind of trick you. There's a bunch that you can tell, But as far as like boomers go, they can never tell, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
look at these babies that are juggling. Like, whoa, that's so cool. How'd they teach these babies how to do that? But
Look at this dog made of slime.
exactly. So, what is? I'm sure you know this, Josiah. There's like a thing of like the government's technology is always like a certain number of years ahead of what the public has.
So the interesting thing is that I do not recall where this originated. I just know that at some point I heard it, and I was young when I heard it. I think I was like in middle school and I heard it, and it was a statement that has not been proven false in my mind. It is only solidified with ages that the military is always at least 15 years ahead of what civilians have. That's like a baseline.
Exactly.
Sometimes it could be like 30 years.
Yeah.
In some cases, but they are 100% do not doubt that they are the government / the military, mostly the military because of the amount of money they got. 15 years ahead of time, and that's not even factoring in Satan being in Area 51, which you can listen to in our aliens video.
Okay, but speaking of the military, though, a big thing that was talked about in the documentary we just watched is how right before JFK died, he was going to the UN and making speeches about how he was against the industrial war complex.
Yeah.
And basically, like, we got to defund the military. We got to shut all this down. Like, we can't nuke each other. We're going to, like, obliterate humanity. And then they're like,
how about we obliterate the back of your skull?
Yeah.
What now?
Rick, what were some interesting things you found in the research you did for this? Because obviously, I feel like everyone, especially like us, we all have like a general knowledge. But what were some interesting tidbits you came across?
Lots of contradictions. Lots and lots of contradictions. But if I'm sticking with one thing, it would probably have to be JFK and the Mob Association, because I read at least 3 different ways he was associated with the mob. With the one name that was like prevalent on all 3 was Sam Giancarlo or and it seems like he was the one that, you know, the CIA, the government, they went to for help on things that they want to be a little shadowy about. But the 3 different connections that I had was he was connected with him through his own dad. His dad had meetings with him, or he was connected with him through Frank Sinatra. Because Giancarlo was one person that let Sinatra sing in his clubs when Sinatra was going through tough times early in his career. And so there's that connection. And then the third connection would be Marilyn Monroe, who supposedly was one of his mistresses. So if we start back at the first one through his dad, supposedly his dad, if you want to listen to a lot of what, like, I guess these are like what Nixon said. Nixon's like, you know, people to scum the Kennedy name. Supposedly he was a bootlegger and ran whiskey during the Prohibition. And that's how Kennedy has ties to the mafia, or at least his father does. But supposedly, if you hear a lot of Kennedy historians, they said that's a lot of stuff that Nixon had made up to, you know, scum the name in order to win the election against Kennedy in '60. And then there's also the Frank Sinatra thing, where Frank Sinatra and JFK were both, you know, guys that like to have lots of fun, lots of extracurricular activities. And it seemed like it was more than just women that they had fun with. But supposedly Sinatra had hooked him up with this person to help rig the election in his own way. It helping take over all of Chicago, which it seems like maybe Chicago had a lot more of a electoral college power back in the day, because it seemed like, you know, a lot of people hadn't moved to the West yet. Because that's the only way I would understand why they would pick Chicago, you know, other than other states. But supposedly Sinatra would sing at like all of his like little can't talk right now, political parties that he had for election. He had an own rendition of his own song that he had to help Kennedy get elected. He helped set up things to help Kennedy get more of the Democratic votes. And after Kennedy got elected, he shunned away Mr. Sinatra because Sinatra had all the mob connections, and Kennedy wanted to kind of be that perfect president and wanted to get away from all that stuff. And especially since his brother would start targeting the mob a few years later as he was appointed Attorney General. The Marilyn Monroe one kind of follows the same route as the Frank Sinatra one, but it seemed like hers is a little bit more sadder because it seemed like her and JFK had like almost like a secret relationship. But then as JFK got elected and wanted to get away from that, he kind of pushed her towards her brother. And it seems like towards the end, she wanted to reveal all this information of the Kennedys and the mob being tied. And it seems like the mob and the Kennedys both didn't want that to happen. So depending on where you look at each story, you can see if the Kennedys had, government agents take care of it, or on the other side, the mob had, their people take care of Monroe because they didn't want, all this extra baggage into the the presidency because of what was going on, because Monroe or Kennedy and the mob were still on. I know I see Katie getting all excited, but the mob and Kennedy were kind of like on the same, page kind of still, because they were trying to get rid of Castro at the time. And
yeah, we know the CIA was, we know for a fact that, we don't know specifically, but the CIA was using literally the mafia to try to assassinate Castro, right?
Yeah. And the mafia had, skin in the game because they wanted to take over the casinos in Havana because Castro was trying to use Havana as like an alternate destination from Vegas and try to get people to fly there. I'll pass this off to Katie because it seems like she wants to talk about some Monroe stuff.
I think there could be a whole separate episode on the deep dive of Marilyn Monroe and her many lovers and her ultimate demise and what happened in the hours following her death, which is super fascinating. But the one thing I wanted to point out specifically, because we were just watching this documentary and it kind of, at the time it linked something, and then the minute you said Marilyn Monroe, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what I was thinking. Is that in both cases, these were very influential, very, like, some of the most famous people of their time who died way before they should have, like, on a natural cause basis. And within the hours and days following their deaths, there's been evidence to believe that both of their bodies disappeared for a chunk of time, and that the bodies were mutilated either prior to or following autopsy to disturb or destroy evidence of foul play. Which just seems like a weird common thread with the timeline and the fact that they were connected, and it makes you wonder if that's perhaps linked.
Do you guys know about the brain thing with JFK?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the brain is missing. It still is.
Yeah.
And the fact that the doctor who did the so they didn't do they illegally moved the body. The autopsy should have been in Dallas, but they moved the body to DC. And on the way, supposedly,
it crashed?
No, supposedly he was switched and put into a body bag and then put into a different casket. And when he got there, there was a wound on the front of his head that was not there prior.
And that they tried to blame on a crash.
Right. I think so.
Some turbulence or something in the plane.
Something.
But when you look at from multiple angles and in color and in black and white, you can very clearly see that it's like a sharp edge. So he either would have in the body bag would have had to hit the corner of something at a really high speed in order to make a 90-degree angle on his forehead.
Do it.
Yeah.
Or somebody was slicing and dicing.
To hide the fact that the bullet hit him from the front, essentially.
Boom, boom, boom.
Since we're on the body, I read a theory about the body. It was said after Oswald had, done his shots and ran away, that there was an arresting an officer nearby named J.D. Tippett, who went to arrest Oswald, and then Oswald shot and killed him. If you want to get into a weird thing, is that J.D. Tippett was chosen to be killed because he had striking similarities to JFK, supposedly.
Oh, no.
And they believe that he may be the second body that was used because
if we theorize that Oswald didn't shoot Kennedy, why would he be killing an officer if he thought he was innocent? It doesn't make sense,
If you look at the pictures, they don't look too similar to me. But some of the pictures that are of Tippett are like those old style of pictures that are kind of like almost look like they're hand drawn. They're like really rough in the definition, so I can't really, see striking similarity. But when you're shot and part of your head's missing, there could be a big similarity. Maybe they had a similar body stature,
True. That's really interesting.
So I think something that I don't know, I think it kind of needs to be said is that none of us believe that Oswald could have done this alone because, right? Like, because I know that nobody has been able to replicate getting those 3 shots off like that since on their first try.
Correct.
I read a theory that the time that they say that Oswald had, which was, I think it was 5.6 seconds.
Right.
Was actually a lot longer than the time given. It was closer to 9 seconds. And if you look at where the building actually is to where Elm Street is, it's an actual straight shot. So even if they're moving away, he's moving in a straight line. So it's just moving the gun slightly. And if you're a decent shot, which I think Lee Harvey Oswald was designated as a sharpshooter in the Marines, I think he was in.
It's funny you mentioned that.
He had 58 out of 60 targets hit, bullseyes, at, I think it was like 250 yards, which was a lot shorter of a distance than where he shot Kennedy from. So there's that, and it also has been replicated by other sharpshooters that technically are better shots than Oswald, but it's still hard to do. They did it on their seconds.
Do you know if they did it on their first try?
I don't.
Okay.
But I read that it had been replicated, and the type of rifle he used was an Italian rifle with a Japanese scope that was built for long range shooting. So, which leads me into another discussion, is that depending on what you think, do you think Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA agent? Or do you think that he was maybe a person that was a Russian, plant?
You can tell.
Or was he contracted by Mr. Fidel Castro to do the shooting, since, there's many attempts on his life from the Kennedys?
Yeah, you can definitely tell that the picture that the CIA was trying to paint was that he was put up to it by the KGB. Just because of all the different stuff of him trying to become a Russia citizen, him disavowing America, trying to get in with the KGB specifically and being like denied, and then trying to go back and everything. There was even stuff about him trying to offer up American intelligence to them, just like trying, just a little fanboy trying to join the KGB. But yeah, so who knows?
Unless they were trying to make him a double agent and the KGB didn't accept him because they smelled that he was not legit.
Too. Yeah, so
which is totally possible because like I'm sure there's people coming who they try to become double agents all the time and they're like, oh, I join. I hate my country. I have some information I can give you, and they're like, okay, sure, buddy.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you feel real sour about it. But yeah, so that is definitely seems to be. I mean, the CIA involvement is like undeniable. It's just the more so question is how heavily were they involved? You know, there's just a little too many elbows that were brushed.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe sucked a little bit.
Yeah. Well,
something I still think is fascinating, no matter who's behind it, is where were the Secret Service that day, and why were they not following basic protocol for parade route?
Why was the bubble top not used? That they, you know,
Mm-hmm.
Why was the roof slanted? Oh wait, wrong one.
But like something even in the documentary we were watching is like not only do they normally have like people like on the presidential motorcade car that were like called off the car and like told like back off, give him space, which is like the opposite of what you do when the car's slowing down. But like they weren't monitoring, weren't monitoring the buildings, and like the windows were open and like the depository, and it's like, why wouldn't they be like, what the fuck's going on up there? Is it like some random bystander? Is it a fucking shooter? Like,
ooh, yeah. Isn't that something that supposedly happened just recently too?
Yes. And the thing is, slanted roof. And the thing is I remember I can't get you the file because it might be out there. I don't remember, but I remember listening to it. But there was apparently a recorder on one of the motorcade officers. He was on his motorcycle and they had the recorders. And I think if you mess with the audio, you can hear 6 shots.
Yes, that's another one where a lot of the eyewitness statements also said 6 shots, and the most common number, I don't remember what it landed on, but it was much higher than 3, and it was more around 6.
Additionally, there's a lot of photography and footage of bystanders during the parade when the shots were fired who were like taking cover like up near the grassy knoll or like trying to charge it in response, which again, when they say like, oh, nothing was happening over there, it's like, well, then why were all these people like having a strong response to the grassy knoll and not to the depository?
Yeah.
I mean, like anytime I've been around like loud noises that I respond to, normally like your body like instinctively follows like the direction of the sound because we're built to like survive attacks, you know? And so like when we hear like a predator, in this case like gunfire, like we're going to respond to where that sound is. Like our bodies are capable of doing that. So why would they all be like, that random hill over there?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a lot of the photography, there's people like on the ground, you know,
like taking cover. And
and then supposedly there's like a dark figure in the background near a tree and on the grassy knoll in the Zapruder film that you could see. And it would almost make sense that, you know, someone would set up there and disappear. And then I think, what was it on JFK, the JFK movie, supposedly there's another group of guys that set up, what was it, like a train station building or a train, it was like almost like I can't remember what it was.
Are you talking about the 3 tramps?
No, it was 2 guys that had set up behind a fence. I can't remember if it was like a junkyard fence or something like that. And there's people that said that they saw people shooting from behind there, where one guy had ran immediately into a car and drove off, where another guy ran a different way into another car and drove off.
So, I think, as far as what I believe, regardless of who's behind it or what combination of people, I think, in my mind, I believe there was, if Oswald was one of the shooters, there was at least one other person.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's what I believe. You know.
So if we want to go in the theory of Oswald being a lone man, supposedly his last, you know, couple of days he had went to the embassy in Mexico, the Cuban embassy in Mexico, and he tried to get a hold of Fidel Castro, and he said that he would do anything to be moved over to Cuba, to travel to Cuba. And he says, I will kill the president if I have to. And supposedly through different channels, the word Castro sent back the word to show me if you can do it. And so Oswald went to Dallas, and supposedly from his wife, he was practicing just aiming at different things without his gun loaded, and just would practice at different focal lengths of just shooting. And I think one of them was like at a kid's football game or something like that he was doing it at.
Fuck.
And then he was like practicing shooting cans. He was supposedly super crazy. And I think this was like in the movie that they tried to paint him off as like almost like an unhinged psychopath. Like I think there's also reports that he would beat his wife with a gun as well. There's pictures of him with the gun, which some people say might be fake because it's in his backyard. But that would show a theory of him wanting to do it so he could prove his allegiance to Cuba for the revolution. And supposedly there was I think a plane that was waiting at a Dallas airport for him to go to, so he can be extradited from the U.S. back to Cuba. But there's been intelligence reports on the Cuban behalf that they were going to pick him up and then drop him off over the Gulf because they wanted to wash their hands of it and not have to deal with him. So depending on how well of a shot he was and how crazy he really was, I could see him being a lone gunman that, went and shot him and then wanted to prove his allegiance to the Cuban Revolution and, be shuttled off to hopefully, safe land.
Real quick,
I'm frozen.
You are frozen for me. I don't know if you are for your guys. Just turn off your camera and turn it back on. Through Discord.
He's holding still so that the assassin can't hit him.
So I don't get shot.
Sorry. I had a dark thought when you're but I'll save it for when you're
go ahead.
There we go.
If we think Marilyn was potentially assassinated herself, and maybe the Kennedys or a Kennedy or somebody from their group knew about it or even did it, it's kind of blasphemous to say, because obviously JFK was, I think people consider him one of our more noble progressive presidents, but he obviously had some skeletons.
Yeah.
Perhaps in a weird cosmic way, and I don't mean this in any way disrespectful, the scheming that had occurred caught up to him.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because either way, he definitely had his hands in a lot of different cookie jars. One of those cookie jars could have bought...
In more than one way. Just cookie jars.
Yeah.
But Rick, what were you saying?
Cookie jars.
Easy killer, easy boy.
Calm down.
So there's another theory that has to involve RFK and Marilyn Monroe, is that the mafia were trying to get RFK to stop, and so they killed JFK to, scare him into stopping. But then as RFK had his presidential campaign and started winning states, and then he won California and he was killed that night, a lot of people were scared, or a lot of people believe that the mob did a hit on RFK because he was going to start digging deeper into his brother's own assassination and start bringing up, things that the Warren Commission probably, didn't dig into. And so a lot of people believe that's why he was assassinated. Marilyn Monroe, supposedly her place that she lived in was bugged, and supposedly that there was like conversations between her and RFK a few hours before she died, and RFK left in a helicopter that was parked on a beach because I guess that when they did an investigation, there was sand in Marilyn Monroe's pool, from what I understand. And it would make sense because the helicopter landed in the sand outside of, for further away, so he can come over secretly, because at that time he was in Northern California with his family, but had snuck away to see Marilyn Monroe one last time. And a lot of people believe that he had some government agents take care of her because of, her wanting to, spill the beans on their association with the mob and all of the things that the Kennedys were doing. And especially, supposedly, she had a miscarriage of RFK's kid.
There's some interesting Marilyn lore as well with, as we know, 2 Kennedy brothers, but she also was briefly married to Arthur Miller, as well as she had, a very long-term on-again, off-again relationship with Joe DiMaggio.
Yeah.
And when you look at how many different powerful and influential people there are, you're telling me, at least in her case, that not a single one of them is an affiliate with the mob or some sort of secret organization when they're all that powerful is like, it stands to me, like I said, to see a through line of like, there may be even more connections. Like if you look at it like a web of like, okay, so here's like Kennedy, we all know things like about the Kennedy curse ideas and stuff. And like, obviously like old granddad Kennedy, like wasn't the most moral person. I mean, he lobotomized his own daughter, who then had to live for like another 60 years in like a long-term care facility because, as far as I know, she was having premarital sex, and he chose to punish her. He also didn't ask his wife before having her lobotomized. He had her institutionalized and then lobotomized.
Oh,
interesting.
So,
yeah. And
a lot of fucked up, powerful people.
It's supposedly Mr. JFK was a man of a lot of pillow talk, and supposedly he spread a lot of secrets, and that could have been another reason that Marilyn Monroe got hit, because she knew too much.
Yeah.
Before this convo, I was very much not thinking it was the mob, because to me it's like, okay, why it has to be the CIA or the CIA using the mob, but maybe let me spin a different narrative. Maybe it was the mob, but because the CIA was using the mob to take out foreign leaders, so that, literally, like if the public found out about this, it'd be, oh, our institutions literally use like criminals and like murderers and assassins to target other leaders, which, that's not, people kind of understand that's true. But maybe it was the mob and the CIA and such, and the Secret Service. They covered it up because they couldn't risk their operations being exposed, because if you break open Cuba and you break open Castro and all that, then you break open the whole chain of events that lead back to the CIA and lead back to this. And then if the mob is kind of tied into Kennedy, maybe Kennedy is learning from them stuff about the CIA, so it could have been, it could have been mob led, or it could have been, but I feel like there's this giant web, and this is similar to the Jack the Ripper stuff, but more so, where people will spend decades, and there's so many thousands and thousands of pages, and there's so many thousands they haven't even released. A
lot of things that are still redacted too on those pages.
Yep.
Yeah.
Something else that's kind of fascinating in the idea of talking about the greater web of like crime and mystery surrounding JFK is not only looking at the Kennedy family and not only looking at Marilyn, but look at the story of his wife. So like, for instance, weird bit of lore, JFK actually dated her sister before he dated Jackie, and Jackie had an affair with JFK behind her sister's back. And so then, if I'm not mistaken, so she stole JFK basically from her sister. So then her sister later on was dating her second husband, Mr. Onassis, and she stole him from her and then fled the country. And if you look, the rest of the, like, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, the Bouvier family that she came from, kind of just fell off the face of the earth. And the few remaining cousins are literally who we get the documentary later on in the 70s or 80s Grey Gardens about, where they're like holed up in a house living off of cat food, and like it's infested with rats, and like she sends them a check in the mail from like out of country where she now lives. And it's kind of like, how did this whole family just like crumble into like the Northeastern Sea effectively after being touched by the Kennedy family?
Yeah, that's absolutely wild. I have a couple other facts, unless you guys want to go into that a little bit deeper.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, let's listen to some facts.
Speaking of slanted roofs, Trump, if you recall, way back when when he was initially running in 2016, there was Ted Cruz who was also running. And the big thing that Trump was saying, which a bunch of people jumped on, was that Ted Cruz's dad was involved in the JFK assassination because, and apparently there's actual evidence to support this. I don't know. I don't know. His dad met with Oswald for breakfast the day before the assassination.
Interesting.
It's funny because I mentioned the three tramps earlier to Rick, and one of those tramps, Woody Harrelson believes it's his father, and that his father was a killer for hire, apparently.
Yeah, that's contract killer.
Yeah, so Woody Harrelson seems to think that his dad was up to no good on Dealey Plaza. So.
No, yeah, and like,
and there's three of them, so that's two.
Yeah,
right. That's two of them. Yeah, Ted Cruz's dad, Woody Harrelson's dad.
Like,
a lot of dads.
I just feel like it's like, what another coincidence of like, throwing this type of really specific shady stuff on the Cruz name. Meanwhile, you have the meme of Ted Cruz being the Zodiac killer.
Yes.
So it's like, what's the connection here? Like, where can we fit this? I don't know. But
where do the shadows fall on the Cruz family?
Exactly. What's going on over there? There's a bunch of
that's another episode.
And yeah. Who knows? Maybe the Zodiac killings were just a little bit of practice or something. I don't know. You know? Or, you know, maybe Ted Cruz grew up in such a gross, toxic environment of conspiracies and assassinations that he himself had a dark side.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Rick.
Oh, I was gonna say, no wonder when Texas froze, he left.
Yeah.
He was just fending for himself. He got scared. He had PTSD.
Like, well, I can't leave footprints in the snow. I need to go over to Mexico.
Can't leave footprints anywhere.
There's too much evidence around here. Here I go. I go kill it again. It's my favorite thing.
Have you guys ever been to Dallas?
I have not.
So Katie and I went on a trip to Fort Worth, Arlington, Fort Worth area. And we were there and we were like, hey, let's go to Dallas. Literally driving there when I said, wait a minute, Dallas? I've always wanted to go to Dealey Plaza. So we drove to Dealey Plaza and we parked and we went and looked at the monument and looked at the depository, which has a sign on it that is defaced that says killed by, I think it said, like, we have the picture somewhere, it's like victim of conspiracy or something like that.
Yeah, or like the CIA did it. Or
yeah, there was graffiti. And then we went over to the grassy knoll, and me, potentially showing a lack of respect, said, hey babe, I want to take a photo. I want to take a Polaroid in Dealey Plaza. Let's take one of me leaning up from the fence of the grassy knoll.
And here's what I'll say. Every time we take a trip, every time that there's like a holiday, sometimes just when we have good outfits, like we will take a Polaroid. Like we have like photo albums full of them. And like know how to use the camera very well, know how the film works. Like I'm pretty aware of like how things react to like light, water, temperature develops. But I'll let you continue just with that knowledge in mind.
So she took the photo, and I think we had taken another one of the sign in front of the depository. And so we had taken like several Polaroids that day. I mean, again, like she's saying, we've taken hundreds. And we took one of me in front of the grassy knoll. It was a funny shot. Like you can literally see like my mustache, my nose, my eyes, my hair, like just peeking over the, like, it's a silly photo. And then we just stuff it into her purse, and then we're kind of walking around and heading back to go get coffee. And then at some point we take the Polaroids out of the bag and we're looking through them. And then I am not kidding you. The one of me by the grassy knoll has a reddish stain going down the side of it, like near my head.
It almost quite literally looks like a blood stain.
Yes.
It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. And like I've seen things that is weird. I've seen them like get water damage, like UV exposure, just like old film that sat out and did weird stuff. And like this was a brand new pack. Like we had taken like 6 more photos that day. All of them developed normally, like all from the same pack. Like
it wasn't the first one. Yeah.
Like stored in the same spot. Just very peculiar.
And I looked at it and I was like, if I were a very irrational person, I would say immediately, like, this is complete supernatural confirmation that there was another assassin at the grassy knoll. But I do think that of all the Polaroids, probably hundreds at this point that we've taken, the only time I've ever seen anything like that, usually you might get some exposure where like you'll get maybe some yellow from the sun, maybe.
Or things are just blurred out because they're overexposed.
Blurred,
like really white.
Blurred out, white or dark, but never have I seen it like this colored, like blood red down the side of it. It
has kind of an odd pattern the way it developed too. Like it looks very like.
Yeah, it's not like it. Yeah, it's not like.
It looks like liquid.
It's not like a line. Like it's literally like kind of like blobby, like it's flowing down the Polaroid.
It was like really, something dripped on it or something.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Really interesting. There's also like, I mean, I don't know. We'd have to dig these out and like make a PowerPoint and like paste it into the podcast. But we found so many like interesting pieces of graffiti too. Speaking of the conspiracies, like people will write on the fence at the edge of the grassy knoll like all of these different things about what they think happened, or they'll like leave notes for JFK, or there's just some really fascinating. Like I think one of my favorites was like the trees know who did it.
Yeah,
which I just thought was really like fun.
They always know.
Okay, so so this does make me go off on a reoccurring subject that we might have here of, obviously a violent act could, there's the idea of emotions and stuff like being stuck in time or whatever, stuff like that. Or you get residual hauntings that way and everything. But on top of it, you have people that are constantly adding to the scene with the notes and the graffiti and everything of just this energy. I mean, they're writing letters specifically to JFK. They're making their voices heard on the conspiracy of what they think it is. I think that would be a very good example of the theory of people creating their own like poltergeists in a way, or whatever you want to call it, of just adding to the energy of a particular area and a particular subject, an emotion, and just fueling it, keeping it alive. I mean, a space and time stained by the blood of a violent act, and it's only been repainted again and again with people not letting it go.
And something that's so fascinating about that is that we talked to some locals, I think, while we were there. And one woman was telling us that they used to have marks, like an X, out in the street that was supposed to have been supposedly where he was shot dead. And it was like to memorialize him. And there's statues and plaques and stuff like all over within several city blocks of like where he was shot. And they had to physically repave the road because people were running out into the street and almost getting hit by cars to try to like stand where he died.
Or like take photos and stuff, Because when that thing's in regular business hours, there's people flying under that underpass. Like they're shooting back and forth. Like it's like, you know, it's normal kind of traffic we have over here.
And there's,
so I can imagine some people almost got
insane there too. Like people just fly, like,
because the underpass literally has 3 lanes that come out and then they like fork and then go around and then, you know, merge and head out into the rest of Dallas.
Speaking of, we talked about the railway system earlier too. If there was like an alternate group, there is like an entire like train system that runs through the center of Dallas as well that would intersect with like the backside of the grassy knoll.
Oh, you could run straight from the grassy knoll to the train lines.
And like we walked the train line for a bit, part of downtown and stuff. So it's a very, the way that the city is laid out is very interesting, which makes me wonder again if this was plotted, if they specifically chose, like if that parade had already been chosen and they just chose to act there because the situation was ideal, or if the location of the parade was chosen because the location is ideal. But either way, it's an ideal situation. There's a lot of road, really elaborate. There's several in the area. I mean, Dallas-Fort Worth is like one of the biggest airports in the nation, and it's like maybe 15-minute drive on the freeway from there.
Yeah, that's the thing when we were there that we noticed is that everything is so spread out, but you can get everywhere so quickly. Like you can get from in Texas, and when we were there, like there were a few times after a concert where it was pretty packed, like in the area. But on a normal day, you could go like the distance of Everett to Seattle in like 20 minutes, like max. You know, it's kind of insane. Like you can get all if you wanted to get someone out of the area, it could be really do, you know.
Yeah.
And from my understanding is that area is kind of pretty tightly packed. Everything is pretty small in there. And it kind of like supports the idea of, you know, if there's a bunch of people there, you know, to see the president, a lot of people can disappear into like a space that's like, you know, super condensed with a bunch of people if it's that small or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's the umbrella man.
Yeah.
Him opening the umbrella signals the assassination or whatever.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Like why does he have an umbrella? It's not raining.
Yeah.
It's for the sun. But, you know.
Why is it open?
So I have a couple of other small little facts that are interesting. So one of them, there was no recordings of any interviews with Oswald after they arrested him. There was only like some notes that were taken, and most of those notes only resurfaced in the 90s. So as far as interactions with Oswald directly, barely anything was like released.
I'm a patsy, then gets shot.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like the fact of like no audio recordings or nothing. Okay. But then another little tiny little fact. So as far as JFK's brain going missing, it went missing 3 years later on Halloween.
Ooh.
Some cultists took it for something.
Fucking weird.
Yeah. I don't know. There's who knows?
I feel like there could be a whole spin-off episode on like missing body parts of celebrities. Like we could talk about like Walt Disney's cryogenically frozen head and like JFK's missing brain. Like
they're all floating in tanks together.
Yeah, like, where are these tanks? Like
we saw what happens in Futurama.
Yeah, Futurama told the truth.
Yeah.
It's all in Area 51.
Just played it off as a joke.
Yeah, exactly. Optimus Prime is going to come rising from the depths of Disneyland, and the brain will be JFK, and then the heart will be the head of Disney. So
one shall stand, one shall fall.
Exactly.
Also, I just wanted to ask, because I've watched several of your guys' videos that I've not partaken in, but because it came up tonight, is this only the second like direct, specifically like haunted like photo or like idea that we've touched on? Because if so, it's interesting to me that they both took place in Texas.
Yeah, I think so.
Texas is haunted.
Yep, Texas haunted.
Spooky.
Hashtag
Everybody
Texas is
knows.
haunted.
We're gonna go there.
I like it.
Fair enough.
Oh, I should have grabbed my cowboy hat. That's my
Yeah.
mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's one aspect of the JFK thing that we haven't really talked about yet, and that is Jack Ruby.
Yeah, the
What do
fact
you
that
guys believe his association with him killing Lee Harvey Oswald. Why did he do it?
well, it's kind of weird that it wasn't publicly acknowledged that he was mob related until much later. Obviously, like if the public had known that earlier, maybe people would have been asking questions. Was he some guy who felt passionately enough to go shoot the assassin? It's possible.
Possibly.
You can be a criminal and be patriotic. It's not. It doesn't preclude.
There's
But
some
given
evidence that supports that, though. That he supposedly was like a big fan of law enforcement,
Right.
and every law enforcement officer that came into his club, he would let them drink for free, let them do everything for free. So I can also see it, seeing that JD Tippett got killed, that he wanted to go get his revenge for his friends or the people that he looked up to,
Maybe it was for JD Tippett and not for JFK.
Okay, so but then there's like the fact of the idea of the mob being involved in all these different aspects.
But the thing is, he owned a nightclub. There's going to be shady people that are going to nightclubs all the time.
Yeah, including maybe corrupt cops, and maybe they build relationships with these cops. Maybe certain cops are involved and weren't supposed to be killed on that day, and then they were. And maybe then the mob was like, hey, I think the CIA who we're working with are trying some shady shit. Let's take this into our own hands a little bit and go finish the job before more evidence gets released.
You want to hear the crazy thing about Jack Ruby that I read? He killed it because he didn't want it to be pinned on he killed Lee Harvey Oswald because he didn't want it to be pinned on the Jews, and he wanted to show that Jews weren't going to kill JFK.
That's
Supposedly,
interesting.
in a newspaper, I think that was released a couple of days before, there was like a big article that was written by a person with a Jewish last name that totally denounced Kennedy and talked really bad about him. And so supposedly after he killed Lee Harvey Oswald, he says, "We got him."
Weird.
So some people think that he did it to prove that Jewish people weren't up to no good.
Yeah.
But then there's also his mob ties that everybody knows about.
But it seems like everybody's tied up in the mob in this story almost,
Exactly.
I know it seems like, we say America runs on Duncan, but is Duncan code word for the mob?
Well, as we all know, the CIA specifically is almost like the mob if it was run by. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As far as the mob, speaking as an ignorant person, are these Italian mobsters? What kind of mob is this?
Well,
because I just think of The Sopranos. So
the mob that they're associated with was called the Outfit, and it was a mob in Chicago that was run by Sam Giancarlo, or Cala, I think. I can't remember exactly what it is, name, right? But it's an Italian guy.
Yeah,
but he was supposedly the direct step down from Al Capone.
Oh,
so that shows you how much power he had.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But supposedly there's something against the mob's influence that the Outfit actually had in the 60s and 70s as their power was starting to decline. Supposedly when Al Capone rigged the election in the 20s, he had a much bigger group of people that he had working with him, and plus had to call people from different organizations to help. And it was for half the group or half the population of what Chicago was at the time of 1960. So with way less people, I think they said the outfit at the time in the 60s only had 200 members. Whereas in the 20s, it was a lot bigger. Plus, they had to call more people to fix an election that was smaller.
Yeah, no. I mean, the idea of a mob rigging an election, I feel like the next step is assassinating a president. Like this isn't a huge stretch, you know?
Yeah. And
it is any wonder that the mob kind of like lost its power after this point? Like maybe they went too far.
True.
Yeah.
Maybe it really got cracked, huh?
Did the mob lose their power though, or did
don't know
it
that.
shift?
Well, we don't.
Again, this could be a whole other episodes, but as the resident former New York resident here, I still think that there are a lot of industries run by the mob. Waste management being one of them, transportation being another. The mayor's office, I'm sorry, but like the last mayor when I was there, people were complaining that waste management wasn't doing their job and that the streets smelled terrible, which they did. And he told people to stop smoking so much weed. And they were like, sir, that doesn't smell the same. Like, you know what Kush smells like, and this is trash.
Yeah.
And that was like when they appointed the rat czar. I don't know if you guys heard about like the soundbite where there was literally like a position titled the rat czar, who was part of the mayoral cabinet, who did a press conference where they walked up and literally just said, the rats don't run this city. We do. And then like mic drop walked off and they were like, what's your actual plan?
That's so funny.
Like, I don't know.
My plan is my Tommy gun.
I kind of feel like, the mob is still alive and well, at least in the East Coast. And I mean, not to, because this is a whole nother podcast subject, but if we look at like some of the showdowns, and again, we could call this gangs, we could call this the mob, like it changes shape, same principle, but like what happened to Tupac in the 90s? Tell me that wasn't like gang/mob-ish related violence, things don't really like go away. I think they just transform.
Well, the thing is when we talk about the mob, I think people generally, like when we say the mob, it was La Costa Nostra.
Yeah.
The Italian Jewish, the Italian Jewish mafia, and they're kind of related. The five families. There's the certain mobs in the Midwest, of course.
Don't forget Vegas.
Well, and Vegas. I just think that you are correct. Is like there's always going to be organized crime. It's just that I feel like there's more factions than there were in the past, perhaps.
Yeah. It's funny that specifically what Katie just said of the mob doesn't really like go away; it just transforms. And that just immediately made me think of Halloween. Of evil doesn't die; it just changes shape. I do have another conspiracy theory. If we want to get into it.
Please.
So apparently 10 days before JFK was assassinated, he wrote a letter. Maybe it was more so a series of letters. And one was to the government of Russia. The other was to the CIA. And it was talking about how we need to come together to go to the moon, to all the space stuff. Like, so he wrote a letter that was ordering the CIA to release all of their information. And, the other letter was to NASA, for all three of these entities to all share there any information about space and everything when it comes to that, so that way they can together work to get to the moon. The Russia letter was more so like, this is what we want to do, and then his letter to the CIA was like, this is an order, and then to NASA was like, we're looking to do this, please, blah blah blah. So there's all sorts of different things you could make of that. For one, just being the stuff that happened with the whole race to the moon and everything. I mean, we were directly competing with Russia, and maybe a part of that competition was a little bit inspired by the fact that JFK was trying to get us to work together, and then obviously the CIA was not happy, and they're like, we don't want to share any information with those commie bastards. Now where I feel like maybe we could get into some really kooky stuff is, well, why would we have an issue with like actually working together to get to the moon? Like, wouldn't that be the most efficient way to make it happen, is for us to work together with all the greatest minds, blah, blah, blah? Well, maybe it's because at this point we already knew that we couldn't go to the moon.
It was fake.
So maybe there was already a little bit of a loose plan as far as the faking of the moon landing, blah blah blah, and obviously Kennedy was poking at that and wanting to really like be 100% transparent with it. He wasn't wanting to be secretive about this at all. He was wanting to share all this publicly, like not to do this in a secret way, to just be transparent with these organizations within each other, but then also to the public. So he was just trying to, it seems that he was very constantly trying to be transparent with a lot of his presidential actions, and people just weren't a fan of that. But yeah, so this is
I don't know what you mean.
Another layer.
What do you guys think is the highest paid intelligence agency in the United States?
It's a good question. Do you know? I don't.
Yeah, I do know. But what do you think it is?
Prize. CIA.
I mean, is it Homeland Security?
It's the Rat Czar.
So it's not Homeland Security, but it is. So did you know that the highest paid intelligence agency in the United States has the least amount of employees, and it is called the NRO, National Reconnaissance? I want you guys to look them up because I think we could discuss them in a future episode. They are responsible for every spy satellite that gets sent up into our atmosphere. They primarily function with contracted employees that are not under the government's books. The agency is allowed to have full autonomy with just hiring random people to do field work in some aspects. And a lot of their mission patches have occultic imagery and alien imagery and Latin phrases. And they're not subtle about it. They literally have like this one image of Satan covering the sun with his wing with like a trident as like a snake of fire goes around them. And it says like, they have patches that say like, we rule the night and we see all and nothing is beyond our reach and stuff like that. So, I'm sure we don't have information. I don't know.
Aren't you thrilled that your taxes are going towards those patches?
I love that. I at least want a patch. Like, come on.
I know. I'm like, send us one in the mail if we're buying one.
So I just. I just Googled when was the NRO founded?
Oh no.
1960.
Gotcha.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Bro.
So wait, 1960 would have been the year that Kennedy was elected?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Interesting.
actually. So.
3 years later.
3 years. Yeah.
But when you, yeah.
So I think that the second and or third and or fourth shooter was in a spacecraft and shot him from space, and that's why it was like the top of his head where like
Gotcha.
the skull. That makes sense to me.
Interesting.
Bruh.
It wasn't actually the depository, it was just a hovercraft next to
I see.
They could move, which is why they could get different angles. The same height, you know?
Yeah. So anyway, I just when you have time, look it up. Wikipedia has some of their mission patches. You can translate the Latin, but there's a bunch more you can find online. And when it comes to like space stuff, and if Kennedy was wanting transparency, I know these guys wouldn't want it. You know, I don't know what they were doing back in the first 3 years they were founded, but I don't think these guys would have liked transparency. They seem to like having the power to spy on people.
Well,
yeah, they like having a patch with an octopus enveloping the world.
Yeah, nothing is beyond our reach.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
so if they're in charge of like that kind of stuff, and their symbolism is demonic in nature, and if you want to get into space stuff when it comes to the Bible, which is where a lot of demonic stuff is, then you got stuff like the firmament. So like that is just, it's just like a whole thing, you know? I mean, the firmament, that theory, or whatever you want to call it, would indicate that we can't go to the moon because there's an impenetrable, whatever you call it, layer of something that we can't pass through. And that's why we can't go to space. There's all sorts of stuff to the Tower of Babel and talking about the firmament and everything in the Bible, and people wanting to go to the stars, but they literally cannot. So the fact that you have an agency that is directly involved in like pretty much that where the firmament would be, if you want to talk about that, and they have symbolism that is demonic, like, come on. I don't know, like, I'm not saying anything, but
we just gotta strap Brandon up to like a EKG machine and then just show him the occultic imagery on these government agencies, and he's just like, come on, man. His heart rate's just spiking. It's like, have you been drinking Red Bull? No.
No.
Yes. No.
But no.
I'm just drinking the firmament. Oh, man.
But yeah, there is so much that is wrapped up in all this, and you could argue that the Kennedy assassination in some ways was the birth of the modern, or it contributed to the birth of the modern countercultural movement. Like obviously civil rights, free love, but a part of that, you know, in the 60s is the Kennedy assassination. I think it drove the entire city of Dallas a little crazy, and how couldn't it? And I think it drove Americans. There's a dualistic kind of nature where you have plenty of Americans who are like, I know I can't trust a lot of my government, but I'm going to, you know, and
try our best to trust.
Try our best, you know, try our best. I may not trust half of them, but hopefully this is the half that I can trust, you know, this kind of stuff. So there's this very divided thinking and conspiracy, like you know, there's always like conspiracies and conspiracy theories, but this kind of, in my opinion, this and then a bit after with the moon landing is what really like kicked it into high gear, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we want to get into one last conspiracy before we call it, this one would be pretty short.
Why is
Yeah,
Kennedy
talked about all the
a
information.
playable character in Call of Duty Black Ops Zombies? What does it have?
Because it's
to
awesome.
Do with the firmament?
Are the zombies drinking the firmament?
Probably.
Go ahead, Rick.
So, the reason why we have a lot of conflicting stories and conflicting ideas about what's happening is supposedly due to Russian intelligence. Supposedly, there's a KBG or KGB agent, not KBG, KGB agent that says that they purposely fed a lot of fake information to United States, like reporters and intelligent agents, because they knew they could cause conflict within if they could start people questioning what really happened. And supposedly the real story of what happened is what we know, but all these other conflicting ideas or things that were said from they sent over from Russia to start a lot of conflicting thoughts, start a lot of people questioning the U.S. government, not to trust them, and it was more of almost like a psychological warfare.
It's like a reverse false flag operation. It did happen, legit, and then but let's use it to make people think it's a false flag.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like pre-reverse psychology.
Yeah.
It's
pre-verse psychology. You know, it's I mean that's the thing, is that's entirely valid. Is Oswald the lone shooter, and certain people just utilize that to create an environment of fear? I've said it before. I've said it to Katie before. Is if you're talking about 9/11, for example, there's plenty of people, there's plenty of reason to think that there were people who could stand to benefit. There's a lot of shady stuff going on around that, but maybe it's just that shady stuff's always happening and then people took advantage of people in fear. Sometimes the conspiracy can be that simple, as there's already shady people doing shady things, and then when something bad happens, they just do more shady things.
And on that note, something that's interesting is, it's kind of a which came first, the chicken or the egg, is when something when something tragic happens, a lot of times our government will jump in and make some sort of accommodation in order for public safety. So could we then say oh, these things were done in order to invoke more control on the public, i.e. upping Secret Service, adding TSA? Or is it that we never had a thought that we needed these things because we didn't assume vile things like that would happen until they happen, and then we're oh, now that we know that that exists, we need preventative measures in place in order to prevent it from happening again. Yeah. And so even kind of with the idea of the Secret Service, I don't know, honestly, I haven't done a deep dive into the Secret Service history prior to the JFK assassination to know what protocols became protocols at what points and for what reason. In regard to some of these things, maybe they didn't have a need. I mean, obviously proof glass in the car until after Kennedy, and now it's pretty, you don't really see windows getting rolled down a lot. They're pretty locked in.
Yeah.
So, maybe it was just something that hadn't truly crossed their minds, oh, they could shoot him out of a motor vehicle, and they done did. So now we got to adapt. And so, who knows?
Then there's not just one car on the convoy now. There's multiple cars that are they don't know which one the president's actually in.
Yeah, kind of the plant cars, if you will, the fake. Yeah, that's a really interesting point.
I think, it's something I like to bring up sometimes is, I feel like everybody here, part of what we enjoy about this and part of what brings us together to do this lovely podcast for you all, is that we have very curious minds. We have very open minds, very questioning minds. We like to explore different possibilities and like to seek the truth, but we're all humble enough to know that there's no way that 100% of it, which I feel like a lot of people have that mindset, unfortunately. But I always like to go back to this, is that when you're dealing with there are always going to be conspiracies. There's always going to be shady backroom deals. There's always going to be conspiracy theories. But sometimes the scariest conspiracy is that it wasn't planned, something happened, and to either, like you're saying, make us feel safe, accommodate mistakes, cover their ass, then things change. And it's not that it was nefarious, it's just that it was a fluke and something crazy happened, like at a critical moment. I'm sure there's plenty of people with guns that get stopped at political and large events all the time, and they just don't tell us, because why would you tell us if it was stopped? And
there's not need to cause panic.
There's no need to cause, so sometimes the scariest conspiracy is that there is no grand plan, that it is there is a large element of randomness and
the
chaos
ecosystem of humanity, and we're all part of it.
And I'm not saying that applies to everything, but I am saying that is always something that Rick, like you were saying, like maybe it was just Oswald, maybe they're not lying to us, and all those documents really are important security information that we really don't need to know, and maybe that's all true. Who knows?
Well,
it was definitely the NASA mobsters hired by
NRO pirates,
who was being blackmailed by the Rat Czar,
who's working for the ghost of Frank Sinatra, inhabiting the head of Walt Disney.
Hail Ratma.
Marilyn Monroe.
I guess since we're starting to come to an end, I guess there's one last question to ask everybody here to wrap it up. What do you believe really happened?
Brandon?
I don't want to start.
I think we should end on Rick, because you're asking the question. So, Katie, how will you go first?
I'm your guest. Rude.
I literally went through one other person.
Go first.
Okay, fine. I'll reiterate what I said at the start. I think the position I take is one where I can't say I'm sure, but my instinct is that there were at least two shooters. I do not know to what motivation, what purpose, who was behind it. I think there was a lot of people who benefited from Kennedy being out of the way. I think there was a lot of schemes going on, ranging from, eventually we find out, like with Nixon, but with intelligence communities, foreign governments, powers within, powers without. There's a lot of people who benefited. There's a lot of people who didn't benefit and suffered because of it. But I think that where I've been for a while now is I'll happily, accept ignorance on most factors, but I do think there were two shooters. And one of them, may have been Lee Harvey Oswald. Maybe he was a patsy. But that's what I believe. And I believe it was a conspiracy. I don't think maybe it's not as clean cut a conspiracy as, say, like MLK. That one is like, oof, that's like, come on. But I believe that it was two shooters. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for going first. Yes, and Rat Czar. It always goes back to the Rat Czar. The Rat Czar runs the world.
You just see like this AI enhanced image where the rat's like biting his leg while he's in the car, giving him rabies, and he's
and that's actually what happened. The gunshot was just to cover the rat. I do think there was more than likely more than one shooter. I do think there was some level of activity on the grassy knoll only because of my haunted Polaroid. Whether somebody shot from there, somebody died there, or somebody ran from there, who knows? But something shady happened on that hillside. I do think if it wasn't two shooters, there was at least somebody else in on it, and I think that other person was in the Secret Service. Simply because of the calls that were made to pull away from the car. Like I said, technologically speaking, they didn't necessarily think to have bulletproof glass at this point, or, you know, the multiple cars in like the lineup and stuff at this point, which are technological advances. But calling essentially officers away from their post seems out of protocol and makes me wonder if somebody was paid.
Yeah.
And it was the Rat Czar. The Rat Czar paid them.
That makes sense to me. I think ultimately it's almost a little bit of everything. Simply because of intention. Everybody, a lot of these powers that be had plenty of reasons to go through with something like that. He was looking to kick the rat's nest. Not the hornet's nest, the rat's nest. The rat's nest. I think that ultimately the world changed after World War II, and there was almost like a new established connective network over the world. And Kennedy was threatening that network. Because Russia had plenty of reasons of their own. The CIA had their reasons. And the mob seems like a very, very strong possibility of involvement at the very least. Who knows the exact involvement, but it does seem like there was enough influence that whoever the final, orchestrator of it was, I think that they had plenty of voices in their ear, and it wasn't just the CIA, it wasn't just the KGB, it was plenty of people that kind of like, they said a little thing and they're like, but I want to do that, and then they look at the guy that they know that would, and then that guy tells that guy, and there's money involved. Maybe I could actually get some sort of benefit from this, and then it all just spirals and rolls into this huge thing, and next thing you know, you have people conspiring to do something, and it's a conspiracy. So absolutely, I believe it was a conspiracy. It's just you kind of don't know exactly who was the final pawn in pulling the trigger, but they were all definitely involved. So I believe all parties were guilty.
Before you go, Rick, you just kind of inspired me. I'll say this. Julius Caesar, the entire Senate stabbed him to death. If that can happen, there's plenty of chances for people to look the other way, or to silently sign off, or to hint, or to wink, or to nudge,
or to call Secret Service off of a car
because of some reason. If an entire Senate can come together to like stab a man to death in the place of government, you could get a group half that size of powerful, influential people to get one or two people to pull a trigger. What about you, Rick?
I think I agree with all that said. I believe that it's a multi-organizational operation. I believe it was one of the things that was set up where it's almost like, the firing squad, where you have multiple different bases covered. So if we all shot at the same time, we're gonna hit our target no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And no one's gonna know who really killed JFK. If we have multiple different people shooting, no one's gonna really know who did it. But we're gonna know the job's gonna get done, and whoever gets caught, you're on your own. And who gets caught is going to be our fall guy. And then what we got to do is we got to quiet the fall guy, because the fall guy is going to say what really happened. And so I think it's something that, possibly, I know this might be a little far-fetched. I feel like it's something that was contracted to the mob. The mob set everything up. But also I feel like since JFK was firmly the enemy of Cuba and Russia, and not really the U.S. at the time, they're firmly really against JFK, the figurehead, that if we could take out JFK, this might ease tension amongst all of us to go back to what we could do on our own and take us away from that World War III where, a year ago, 13 days, we were this close to World War III nuking each other. But if we can get rid of that and use him as the target and use, Oswald as the scapegoat, then we all get what we want. And we get our guy out of the way, because the U.S., wanted him out because he was trying to, be less of or be more of a transparent president. He wanted to end the military-industrial complex. He wanted to work with our enemies on, getting to form a goal to better for our civilization. But that's not really what the powers that be want. They want eternal conflict, so that way we're stuck in this cycle that will always keep going while they're able to do everything they can without us figuring out what's really going on. It's just like, what you guys said earlier with the Epstein Island thing, where Will and Jada were on it, and slap. We're distracted and we're over here. It's what, the Roman Colosseum was used for. It was distract the people from what the government was actually doing. And, look, we have football that's going on. We have sports that happen year-round now to distract the public and to keep people fanatical about their teams, but not turning their eye back to the government. Because from what I've learned, in a mass media class, is that, the reporters watch the government and we're supposed to watch the reporters. It's supposed to be a circle that we watch each other, but now we don't really watch the reporters anymore. The reporters are not really watching the government. The reporters are reporting more for entertainment now, if anything. And they're reporting for ratings. So we're almost stuck in this almost sensationalism of where whoever can come up with the craziest story, or the P. Diddy of the time, to distract the world from what the government's doing, or whatever's going on. We're going to keep doing this, and it's going to keep everybody asleep and not wake up to exactly what's going on, to what the world's really happening. Keep us distracted from maybe, Palestine and Israel. Maybe there's a little bit more to that. Maybe there's a little bit more to, Ukraine and Russia. Or maybe those are things to distract us of what we're really doing into the Middle East. Or maybe our dealings with China or Russia,
Or space.
There's a lot of things to distract us. Yeah, space.
Space Force.
Keep us distracted from the Rat Czar. He said that he owns us.
The NRO, bro.
Yeah. So I believe that, it's a multi-organizational hit that multiple people were in on, and they agreed that to put all their stuff aside, let's just get this done, so that way we can all go back to what we really want, and we get what we want gone and out.
Status quo rules.
To piggyback on that relates kind of to what we were just saying, but also I think still loops back into this whole idea of like organization all over the public from multiple angles. As filmmakers, which all of us are, and like artists and creators, something we always have to ask when we're creating a new piece of work is like, why now? Why this story? Like, what is the point of telling this story at this point in time? Or is it relevant to tell right now? Is this something we need to shelf until another time? And I think that the same is to be said at this point in time. And maybe this has gone back multiple generations. I haven't done enough of a deep dive into like probably pre like 90s media. But again, if we're talking about the media, something that I think even as far back as the 70s, you can look at like what Kander and I were writing with Chicago, and they're telling a narrative of basically like these women who went to prison for murder, and oftentimes very, very vile, very violent murder, because their stories in the media were sensational enough that they garnered the respect and the admiration and the following of the public and of the reporters, and therefore their juries would let them off the hook because they wanted to support them. And like when I think about a more modern day example, you know, we have O.J. Simpson, or like we're now talking about P. Diddy is another person that like we get these celebrities who come to light, and like the multi-layers of sensationalism and like outlandish behavior and like media perpetuation of this outlandish behavior to cover each other's tracks, like, is just so astounding to me. Like when you look at
people can call in and squash a story, and the you know, the reporter wants to do it, but if your editor says no, we're not doing the story, you literally can't do anything because they run the paper. Yeah. You know, it's.
And I feel like this is why we get a lot more conspiracy theories in our age, because a lot of people will try to report something, and we're like, oh, we're not going to report on that. Well, it must be true then, if nobody wants to talk about it.
Yes, yeah.
We're hiding it.
Laptop went missing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, there was nothing on there aside from coke and hookers. Don't worry about it. No.
Yeah. Don't worry about it. But yeah, I just think that it was almost like the start of everything of what is culminating to what our society is now.
Yeah. For sure.
No, that's a great point.
All right,
you know, guys. With that point, please like, subscribe, love us, comment, love us. No, I'm dead.
There, yeah.
Love us, comment, tell us we're stupid and we don't know anything about JFK, and say that we generalized everything. Please do. But then tell us why we generalized everything and why we're wrong. Don't be those people that just tell us we're stupid and we're wrong. Tell us why we're wrong. Start that conversation with us. Please, we'd love to hear it and love to have that conversation. But with that,
I'll cry.
Exactly. I'll cry in the shower. Hide my tears of shame.
Because
of stupidity.
Tears in the Rain. Blade Runner.
But with that, do you guys have anything else to say?
Just like and subscribe, or like the Rad Czar is gonna come after your ass. So like,
not the Rad Czar.
Yeah, don't mess with him. This has been fun. Thanks for letting me guest.
Thank you for coming on, Katie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think
you can replace one of us anytime you want.
We can probably just say that you are not just a guest, but you are part of the fictitious dark.
Oh, thanks, you guys.
I never agreed on that.
Good job.
You're gonna be on the next one,
maybe.
When you know the topic, you're gonna want to be on it.
Yeah, probably.
So you know, not to jump ahead, but I think once something crazy happens, I think our next topic is going to be the Salem witch trials.
Ooh.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye.
Bye.